A disconnect between a state lawmaker and several top prosecutors. Why legislation sponsored by Senator Jill Carter is raising concerns. Fox 45 News questioning Baltimore police on how many juveniles have been involved in carjackings or auto thefts just this week. What one expert say can be done to help curb those crimes. And happening right now, the final town hall between Mayor Scott and Acting Police Commissioner Richard Worley before Worley's confirmation hearing next month. What we can expect from this meeting coming up.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 6.
I do think maybe law enforcement is misconstruing the law.
It's becoming more and more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
They know that, nothing's really going to happen to them if they keep their crime in a certain limit of types of crime.
Well, tonight, Senator Jill Carter is not seen eye to eye with top prosecutors across the state. It has to do with a rise in youth crime and changes to how we hold young people accountable. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Bubala. Thank you so much for staying with us. Fox 45 News has seen a disconnect between this state lawmaker and top prosecutors surrounding the juvenile justice laws currently on the books. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost spoke to Senator Carter about the demands for changes to juvenile laws.
Senator Jill Carter says law enforcement, prosecutors, and leaders all over the state of Maryland don't understand the law that she helped sponsor and get through the General Assembly. But the message from these leaders on the ground is clear. They say the changes to the juvenile laws aren't working.
5, 8, 9.
Senator Jill Carter standing by a plan she helped usher through the General Assembly. Not prosecuting kids under 13 with certain crimes and preventing questioning of juveniles without their parents' and attorneys' approval. Do you think that it's really having the intended impact?
I think that police and prosecutors need to be better educated if they're believing that they can't do anything, which I don't know why they would believe that. It makes no sense.
Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates disagrees.
Our problem is the system, and the laws just aren't working.
Saying kids are learning the laws and no, they won't face consequences.
There's nothing the law will allow us to do to hold them accountable, and they're doing whatever they want.
But it's not just Baltimore City's top prosecutors sounding the alarm about these juvenile laws. Baltimore County State's Attorney Scott Schellenberger.
They know that, nothing's really going to happen to them if they keep their crime in a certain limit of types of crimes.
Even in overwhelmingly Democratic areas like Montgomery County.
They come in, we can't detain them, they're back in the community the next day. They get picked up for the second one, can't detain them. They're back in the community again the next day. They pick up a third. They're back in the community again the next day.
These top attorneys, seeing the revolving door of kids committing crimes, point to the laws as the problem. And police are the ones picking up the same kids time and time again for the same crimes. Like the 11-year-old in Baltimore County arrested 13 times since May 31st for stealing cars.
That's what uninsured motorists for, people like you.
Or another 11-year-old seen in this video obtained by Fox 45 News getting released by Baltimore City Police after allegedly stealing a car. No charges filed. From Anne Arundel County.
The 11 and the 12-year-old, had it been a carjacking or an attempted carjacking, that meets the criteria for those offenders to be charged. But since it was a crime against property, which motor vehicle theft is a crime against property and not a crime of violence, it does not meet the criteria for charging.
To Prince George's County.
Under the new laws of the state of Maryland, it has become more difficult for police to question young people about anything.
The message from leaders in elected office to on the ground and in the courtroom is the same.
We have 15 and 14-year-olds running about our community at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, armed and dangerous, unaccountable, and unafraid. None of us feel safe. I don't feel safe stopping at a gas station to get gas.
There is a huge disconnect.
Political analyst John Deedy says Senator Jill Carter and other architects of the juvenile reform plans like Delegate Luke Clippinger need to do a better job of explaining what's changing. But the changes are raising questions, and now no one is taking responsibility for what went wrong.
But when you point one finger at somebody, 3 are pointing back at you. And I think that, there needs to be more legislative accountability. Now, maybe you need longer than a 90-day session to kind of comprehend some things.
Well, Carter argues some law enforcement and prosecutors might be resistant to change, and there are steps to take for kids routinely breaking the law. Prosecutors from all corners of Maryland argue the current juvenile justice restrictions tie their hands and protect the suspects of crimes more than the victims.
Some states' attorneys say that these kids' lives are at risk, and without change, this juvenile crisis that we're seeing in terms of crime will only get worse. In the newsroom, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, Senator Carter says law enforcement can file what's called a child in need of supervision petition when there's a young offender. That petition can offer programming and services like counseling to the child and family, but those services are voluntary. Carter says next session she will once again introduce legislation that would require police departments to file the petition. The same plan failed to pass last year. And that brings us to our question of the day. Who's responsible for the juvenile crime crisis? Parents, lawmakers, both, or none of the above? So far, 83% of those who voted say both. To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Meanwhile, tonight, Fox 45 News is asking if Baltimore police know how many juveniles are responsible for hundreds of auto thefts and carjackings that have occurred in just the past week. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell has that story.
Carjackings and auto thefts are happening every day across the city of Baltimore. And if these crimes are committed by juveniles, some argue they'll likely be right back out on the streets or not charged at all. This newly released surveillance picture captures the suspect who investigators say committed an armed carjacking in Upper Fells Point back in July. Metro Crime Stoppers now putting a $4,000 reward on the table for information that will help lead to an arrest as carjackings and auto thefts continue to plague Baltimore. The numbers alarming. In just 1 week, there have been 26 carjackings and 227 auto thefts, according to BPD's crime mapping data. One of those carjackings happened just 1 week after and 3 blocks away from where Daryl Benner was shot and killed outside of his home in Canton by suspects who police say were stealing his nephew's car.
But he did take his final breath laying in my lap.
This surveillance video capturing the armed robbery that led to the homicide. The suspects still on the loose.
The general reason why cars are stolen nowadays or carjacked is to provide a vehicle to commit other crimes. And by and large, those crimes are being committed by juveniles, some as young as 12, 13 years old.
When it comes to this latest 7-day data, Fox 45 News questioning Baltimore police, how many of these crimes were committed by juveniles? Juveniles committing crimes and the laws in place, a top concern voiced by some leaders. The Juvenile Justice Reform Act prohibits children under 13 from being charged with most crimes. In fact, just last week, Fox 45 News uncovered an 11-year-old arrested by Baltimore County Police who was found to be connected to more than a dozen car thefts across the region, is not facing charges due to his age. Some argue change is a must.
I think if there were better means of accountability and there were more consistently applied accountability, we would see the numbers go down.
Again, we asked that question to Baltimore police. We have not yet heard back. In Baltimore, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
The final community meeting before Acting Police Commissioner Richard Worley's confirmation hearing just got underway a few minutes ago. The mayor says the community meetings are an opportunity to talk about how to best build a safer Baltimore and to hear from residents about what they want to see from the city's police commissioner. Residents have stepped to the mic with a range of concerns over these town halls, including police brutality and a rise in violent crime. But residents have also pressed the mayor and his nominee over drug dealing and other low-level offenses.
The prostitution. The prostitution brings the Johns in who feed the prostitutes with money. When can Morrill Park expect to see your police officers start engaging with arresting the prostitutes?
We're going to try to work a strategy of diversion where we can, without arresting them, get them the services that they need. I can only tell you that we've been working on it and we will continue to work on it.
Fox 45's Keith Daniels is at today's meeting. He will be bringing us a full report tonight on Fox 45 News at 10.
Fox 45 is following breaking news right now. Video into our newsroom shows the moments before a man dies in the custody of Baltimore police. It happened last month in downtown near the convention center. According to state investigators, police were called to a report of a man who was threatening others and wanted to take his own life. That man has been identified as 29-year-old Trey Ellinger from Glen Burnie in Anne Arundel County. You can see police put handcuffs on him, but the state isn't showing what happened once he was inside the ambulance, and we don't know how or when Ellinger passed away. An investigation into his death is ongoing. Mary?
Okay, thank you. Well, a chaotic start to the school year continued this morning for Howard County parents and students struggling to get their kids to class. Parents telling Fox 45 News that 20 bus routes were suddenly canceled late last night, with parents receiving the notice at 11 p.m. The county says their new out-of-state bus company doesn't have enough drivers to cover the routes. In a statement this evening, County Executive Calvin Ball added his voice to the chorus of people calling for the transportation issues to be solved. He pointed out that over the last 4 years, the county has increased how much money it gives to the school system for transportation. Calvin Ball also noted the school system has exclusive and sole authority over student transportation, and parents should direct their questions and concerns to them.
A human smuggler with ties to terrorism helping migrants cross into the U.S. I'm Atra El-Nashar with what the White House tells us about how they're addressing this threat.
And if you're planning on headed down the ocean for this weekend, getting there, temperatures in the 70s and sun, and it looks gorgeous through the Labor Day holiday weekend. I'll let you know how it looks around here and some tropical troubles. It's all in my Weather Authority forecast.
Well, tonight, a fresh look at the threat of human smugglers at the U.S.-Mexico border. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar joins us live from Capitol Hill with what we're learning about the transnational threat of these trafficking networks. Good evening, Atra.
Hey, good evening, Mary. The National Security Council is confirming that U.S. officials are looking into a group of migrants that came from Uzbekistan and were smuggled into the United States with the help of someone who has ties to ISIS. a threat at the southern border that originated in Central Asia. First reported by CNN, a human smuggling network with a member who has ties to ISIS helped transport more than a dozen Uzbek nationals earlier this year. They were allowed into the United States after seeking asylum. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson tells us once the intelligence community learned of this, federal officials took swift action to track down those who were smuggled in and place them in expedited removal. Watson says, quote, there was no indication and remains no indication that any of the individuals facilitated by this network have a connection to a foreign terrorist organization or are engaged in plotting a terrorist attack in the United States. But it demonstrates broader concerns about national security threats stemming from a broken immigration system. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says they've made progress.
Our campaign to disrupt and dismantle human smuggling networks has resulted in the arrest of nearly 14,000 smugglers.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are frustrated over sluggish flows of legal immigration following the pandemic. An outdated system unfit for the number of people who want to enter and to meet the demand for workers here in the U.S. Former acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan says this presents an opening for smugglers.
Business is good, and whatever that is, you're going to have warring smugglers and cartels fighting over those lucrative routes. You're going to have more opportunity to exploit more migrants because more of them are coming.
But according to data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, encounters at the southwest land border this summer have been lower than they were in 2022 and 2021. Now, the National Security Council tells me they view human smuggling as a transnational issue and are working with foreign partners to stop these networks before they get to the U.S. Of course, critics of the Biden administration say this effort does not go far enough.
And Audra, what do we know about how the U.S. is addressing the route smugglers use to transport the migrants?
Right, often this is about literally stopping these human smugglers in their tracks. The Biden administration last spring launched a counter-human smuggling campaign. You heard Secretary Mayorkas talk about the arrest of 14,000 smugglers in the past year or so. There's been about 1,300 U.S. personnel deployed essentially to Latin America, to the U.S. southern border to address this issue. But this is a global issue, not just in Latin America, despite how often we focus coverage in those areas. The United Nations, in a report they put out recently, talks about how migrants can go from East Africa to South Africa to Brazil to Costa Rica as they make their way up to North America. But it's often difficult to prosecute a lot of these smugglers because who would be the most reliable witnesses? The migrants they smuggle. And often, as we know with undocumented migrants, they tend to stay in the shadows when it comes to speaking out against a crime like this.
It is a huge, difficult problem. Audra El-Nashar reporting live for us from D.C. Thank you. Well, you're taking a look at the Key West, Florida, on the right side of your screen as the state prepares for Hurricane Idalia. You can see there's already strong wind from the approaching storm there. Idalia is the first major hurricane set to make landfall this year, threatening millions with potentially deadly storm surges and heavy flooding. Evacuations underway in at least 22 counties. It's expected to hit Florida tomorrow.
Yeah, we really haven't seen anything yet in terms of Idalia. That's making its nearest pass to Key West, but still well offshore. Going to be a different story tomorrow. Taking a look at the Mile 1 Task Cam and Toyota Ishino Harbor Sky Cam. Nice and quiet and ahead of Idalia. We have some flood watches and our next weather maker that's going to be moving at us here in the mid-Atlantic. Now, the good news is it is going to be ahead of Idalia, and it's going to actually pick Idalia up and push it offshore and away from us. So, yeah, just what the doctor ordered when it comes to the tropics around here. We do have a flood watch that's in effect out to our west into western Maryland and West Virginia. And then there's the big mess that's down to the south. Take a look at all of the colors here. Then I'll overlay the radar. And what's going on here is the impact from Idalia. It's still offshore, but notice it's moving its way off to the north and the northeast. And thankfully, for our purposes, that will remain down to our southeast. Now, it could become a Category 3 hurricane by the time it makes landfall tomorrow. Going to probably be some devastating pictures with up to 15 feet of storm surge above ground level over portions of Florida north to Tampa. Then take a look at that big hook it makes out to our south and east and away. Now, Franklin may have some more impacts in our forecast, even though it's even farther away than Idalia. It's way over the open portion of the Atlantic, but it's pushing a lot of water north and west. So as we head toward a big beach weekend. Could have some rough seas, some high surf, as well as the potential of rip currents through especially the middle and end portion of this week before this cold front that's off to our west pushes through for tomorrow morning, takes rain with it, and it takes the tropics with it as well. Right now, 79. Feels like temperature also at 79 with lots of clouds on the Mile 1 task cam. Here comes a front from the west. Notice the showers overnight, maybe a rumble of thunder, especially toward morning. You see some of the yellows, oranges, and reds. So it could be a little wet for the morning commute or the trip into school. And then midday and afternoon tomorrow, still very warm day as some sunshine tries to come out, but humidity levels come down. Lots of clouds, showers, maybe a thunderstorm tonight, an early shower storm tomorrow about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. That should be out of here. Your exclusive 10-day forecast. Going to let you know if we have any tropical troubles in a couple of minutes.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
As we continue to track Hurricane Idalia, an important reminder about storm surge.
Because a 12-foot storm surge not just inundates the lower levels of structures adjacent to the coast, it can inundate the upper floors, the second floor of these structures. And this storm surge is the most deadly part of a hurricane. It kills more people than any other aspect of the storm.
Well, there is a new item that parents are being urged to add to their back-to-school checklists along with supplies and new clothes. The CDC wants all kids to be vaccinated against COVID and more. Denise Whitaker from our Sinclair sister station in Seattle has the story.
This is where all of our sequencing occurs.
The director of the CDC got an up-close look at the COVID sequencing going on in a Washington State Health Department lab.
Each instrument can handle about 1,300 samples per shift.
We are seeing more cases of school-age children of COVID where folks have gone back to school. Now, I know we haven't gone back to school quite yet here in Seattle, but that's what we should expect.
Dr. Mandy Cohen tells me there are lots of germs and they'll be mixed up in every classroom we've got, which is why she's urging every parent to add vaccines to their back-to-school checklist.
What I want folks to hear from me as a mom and as a doctor is vaccines are safe and they work.
Dr. Cohen tells me vaccines provide the best protection, not just against COVID, but also influenza and RSV as we're heading into our winter months.
And for the first time ever, we also have a vaccine against RSV. So we have more tools than ever before to protect ourselves. We just need to use them.
I asked Washington Secretary of Health, Dr. Umar Shah, what else parents need to do to keep their kids healthy.
The first thing I always tell parents is make sure you connect with your child. Make sure you know what's happening. Don't share things when don't put things in your mouth. Don't try to do things that you may not be really thinking about that could extend risk.
Dr. Shah also tells me that you should test anyone in your household who's not feeling well so you know right away whether or not it's COVID or could be something else, and then connect immediately with your physician or pediatrician or find a local community clinic to get some help. In Shoreline, Denise Whitaker.
Your exclusive 10-day forecast, 88 tomorrow, but that's with lesser humidity. Could see some showers, maybe a rumble of thunder in the morning, so keep that in mind. It could be a little wet for the morning commute in spots. Touch of fall, real nice on Thursday, 79. And this drier air is going to keep all the tropics away over the weekend. Maybe some higher than average seas out Ocean City way through about, say, Thursday, Friday. By Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we're seeing a warming trend and lots of sunshine, mid-80s to even the 90s. The pool's going to be in full action as we close out the season. 93 on Tuesday and still hot to wrap up next week.
Well, finally tonight, welcome home to Maryland Task Force 1, who just got back from helping with wildfire relief efforts in Maui. The group traveled to Maui County 2 weeks ago to help search and rescue teams in the wake of those devastating wildfires that killed at least 115 people and destroyed more than 2,000 structures and homes. Photos and videos posted to Twitter early this morning show members of the task force, as well as Montgomery County and Washington, D.C. firefighters arriving at BWI. Welcome home. We are so glad everybody made it back safely. Well, that's all for Fox 45 News at 6. Family Feud is next. We'll see you back here for the news at 10 tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.